I'm Orkan Amashov, you're watching Caucasus Now. Despite persistent efforts to decouple the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace negotiations from the Turkish-Armenian normalization track, these two remain intricately and intimately entwined. This is a reality shaped by a common position upheld by Baku and Ankara, with Yerevan being somewhat compelled to acquiesce, albeit reluctantly. What is the true nature of this interconnection between these two processes? What does this interlinkage entail in real terms? And most crucially, what might unfold on the Turkish-Armenian front the day after Baku and Yerevan sign a peace deal? Let's try to understand.
Հայաստանի Հանրապետությունը անկախ պետություն.
Since Armenia's independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, diplomatic relations between Yerevan and Ankara have remained elusive. The conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan over Karabakh from the very outset cast a long shadow over the prospect of normalization. In 1993, following Armenia's occupation of Azerbaijan's Kalbajar region, Turkey, despite being among the first states to recognize Armenia's independence, unilaterally closed its land border with this country. This act entrenched a linkage that initially centered on the Karabakh question, but in the aftermath of the 2020 war evolved into a broader interconnection between the post-war Azerbaijani-Armenian normalization process and Turkish-Armenian relations, a linkage that continues to shape not only the trilateral dynamic among these nations, but the wider geopolitical landscape of the region. A fleeting thaw emerged in 2008 to 2009. The Zurich Protocols envisioned the establishment of formal diplomatic ties and the opening of borders. Yet these accords were never ratified. Domestic resistance in both countries, coupled with strong objections from Baku, alarmed by the absence of any reference to Karabakh, rendered this, some would say untimely, initiative stillborn. President Erdogan later made ratification explicitly conditional upon Armenian withdrawal from Azerbaijani territories, further solidifying the nexus between the two tracks. Then, after more than a decade, came the transformative war of 2020. Azerbaijan's victory and the restoration of its territorial integrity, culminating in full de facto sovereignty over the remainder of the Karabakh region in September 2023, fundamentally altered the regional landscape. By early 2021, in the immediate aftermath of the war, some speculated that this new reality might auspiciously decouple Turkish-Armenian normalization from the Azerbaijani-Armenian peace track, or conversely, that progress in one might serve to catalyze movement in the other. In December 2021, a significant development took place. Yerevan and Ankara appointed special envoys, former Turkish ambassador Serdar Kilic and Armenian Deputy Parliamentary Speaker Ruben Rubinyan. Their first meeting followed in January 2022, with Moscow being the venue for discussions. Subsequent rounds of talks were held in Vienna, culminating in a tentative agreement to open the land border for third country nationals and diplomatic passport holders. That agreement, however, remains unimplemented, pending further progress between Baku and Yerevan. The most recent contact came in July 2024, when the fifth round of discussions was symbolically held at the Alekan-Magra border crossing. Yet the crux of the matter remains, with a draft peace agreement between Azerbaijan and Armenia finalized as of March 2025. How enduring and symmetrical will the interdependence between the two diplomatic tracks remain? Baku insists on the removal of what it calls constitutionally enshrined territorial claims, specifically in reference to the preamble of Armenia's constitution and the formal dissolution of the OSCE Minsk group as prerequisites for any binding peace. Without these conditions fulfilled, no accord, and by extension, no Turkish-Armenian normalization, is deemed conceivable. Ankara publicly aligns itself with Baku on this point, with any divergences, if any, carefully kept under wraps. But what follows the eventual signing of a peace accord between Baku and Yerevan? Will Turkey and Armenia move toward full normalization, or will a more limited rapprochement, such as a partial border opening, serve merely as a temporary waypoint? And in the longer term, how synchronized will these two diplomatic journeys remain? For Yerevan, detaching them would enhance its maneuverability. For Baku and Ankara, the linkage has strategic value. The road ahead remains layered and uncertain, but what is clear is that the fate of one track continues to echo down the path of the other.
And joining us now, three distinguished guests representing the three corners of this intricate regional triangle. From Yerevan, we welcome Boris Novosadian, a political analyst and observer of the Armenian foreign policy. Welcome. From Baku, we're joined by Ahmad Alili, director of the Caucasus Policy Analysis Center, an institution that has always been at the forefront of regional thinking and strategic outlook. And we are honored to welcome Ambassador Aydin Urhan, former Turkish diplomat, a respected voice in the Turkish foreign policy community. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Boris, allow me to put my first question to you. So we realize that Armenia would have rather preferred these two processes being viewed as separate tracks. But as I mentioned during my introduction, under the current circumstances, Yerevan seems to have been sort of compelled to acquiesce with this reality. How has from Yerevan's perspective, the relationship between these two processes has evolved over the years?
There is still a dispute among Armenian expert community and general public whether it is possible to decouple Armenian-Turkish and Armenian-Azerbaijani process. But I think that the lessons of football diplomacy 15 years ago or even more proved that this is hardly possible, especially that now Turkey and Azerbaijan have much closer relations than then. They have Sochi Declaration, which manifests the strategic alliance between the two countries. And I don't think that it is possible now to decouple the process. It will remain synchronized. And of course, any progress in Armenian-Turkish relations could happen if there will be some progress and green light from Baku. So we should not be idealist, and we have to be realistic. And this is what I try to explain the audience when I'm interviewed in Armenia, that Turkey values its relations in Azerbaijan very much, and whatever important for this country would be also a reconciliation with Armenia, it will never happen before there is progress in Armenian-Azerbaijani negotiations and practical decisions about the peace.
Thank you very much indeed. Ahmad, turning to you now. From Baku's standpoint, how central is the principle that Turkish-Armenian normalization should remain contingent upon tangible progress in the peace negotiations with Yerevan? Could you walk us through those fundamental elements that form Baku's position? Because a lot has changed in the South Caucasus as of 2020. Azerbaijan is very strong. The atmospherics dominating the political landscape back in 2008, 2009 are no longer with us. But Azerbaijan still maintains the view that Turkish-Armenian normalization should only happen after the peace deal. Could you walk us through the key elements of Baku's current standpoint?
Yeah, of course. I believe that I agree with Boris what he said, that Azerbaijan and Turkey relations, they are much more strategic. So Azerbaijan, Armenia, Turkey is one of the elements of these relations, right? For example, recently we are all talking in Azerbaijan about Syria-Azerbaijan relations, and we are seeing that Azerbaijani-Syrian relations, there is at least the intensity of the diplomatic communications increased. That's because in Syria you have as main players Turkey, Iran, and Russia. And Israel as +1. So whatever happens between Israel and Turkey, whatever happens between Turkey and Russia, Iran and Turkey, so it's all interconnected, right? So can Azerbaijan and Turkey decouple these relations and look at them, in an isolated manner. So I believe that this is a very European approach to this issue, that we have to compartmentalize everything and approach everything in a separate manner. But when you are living in a region such as South Caucasus, everything is interlinked. So that is why, in this context, you cannot decouple Azerbaijani-Turkish relations on other issues, and especially on the issues that's related to Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process or normalization process. So in this part, I believe that this is one of the fundamental elements that we have to understand, that theoretically decoupling these relations is not possible. Even for Azerbaijan, like the US-Iran relations and US-Russia relations, right? For some people outside of the region, these relations would look like a bit separate tracks. But for Azerbaijan, and I'm sure for Armenia and Georgia, it's very similar, so we have to keep an eye on all of those issues. But of course, when it's about specifically Baku-Yerevan-Ankara triangle, I believe that Azerbaijan has concerns that after the 2020 Karabakh War, Armenia understood one thing, that the biggest problem was for Armenian foreign policy, and that back then it was made publicly available, that the biggest problem for Armenia was that Armenia allowed Baku and Ankara get too much closer to each other, and they start acting as together. So for Ankara, and I believe that with the previous dialogues with Boris, we also mentioned that there is no Baku and Ankara position. There is a position of Baku #1 and Baku #2, right? So Azerbaijan is concerned that Armenia tries to decouple it and then approach each partner separately. And once there is a certain peace deal signed with Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan implementation of this peace deal, and the focus purely on Turkish-Armenian relations. So that is what Azerbaijan is afraid of. That's what Azerbaijan concerns are. So that is why Azerbaijan tries to be always present in Turkey-Armenian normalization process also. Baku wants these relations to move forward, but after Armenia taking into account all Azerbaijani concerns, because Baku is worried that once Azerbaijan and Armenia signs a deal, and then Armenia and Turkey starts normalization process, Armenia will not pay attention to implementation of this deal. So these are the main elements of the deal, but of course there are other more elements in this context also.
Ambassador, I didn't allow me to bring you in at this point. First of all, thank you very much. I reiterate my thanks to you. For the first time in the history of the Caucasus Now, we have a guest outside the South Caucasus. So we got this format 3+3, and Turkey is a major neighbor, and geographically, I think certain section of Turkey are geographically part of the Caucasus. So it's a very important moment for us within the confines of Caucasus Now. Again, I reiterate my thanks. My question to you, where do Turkey's geopolitical interest lie in this equation? Of course, Azerbaijan and Turkey, as Boris mentioned earlier, Azerbaijan has got very strong relations based on this allied interaction, but Turkey is a sovereign state, may have its own interest. Therefore, it would be nice to hear your reflections on this very intricate subject.
Thank you again for having me. In Turkey, a lot of people rephrase Atatürk for nonsensical reasons, for getting points, etc., etc. But the one thing I will say now from Atatürk exactly fits our situation. Peace at home, peace in the world. The reason, Turkey is a rising power. We are producing and we are exporting, and it's rocketing up. What do you want in such a situation? Just like Pax Britannica, you need Pax Turkica, or Pax Caucasus, Pax Middle East, Pax Balkans, and the greater region, of course. So please make sure we are very sincere for peace in the Middle East in the Balkans, and in the Caucasus. And we are active players in all three areas. We want nothing but peace in the Caucasus. Please note this. Turkey is very sincere. Ambassador Kılıç, Serdar, is a close friend of mine. Sometimes I talk with him. He is so sincere. He says we as Turkey are so sincere. The point then is this. Pashinyan. Pashinyan is a great chance for Armenia, for Turkey, and for Azerbaijan. We should use this chance. We understand Pashinyan is under pressure from his people. So we should also help him. The other thing, you cannot decouple Turkey and Azerbaijan. Nobody should expect this. We are one nation now. As our friend from Armenia said, Boris, that we are one nation. But why not get Armenia among us? It is not impossible.
Allow me, Ambassador, with the greatest possible respect, if I may, I would like to hear from Boris about this intricate moment. The two things, Boris, if I may, I would like you to reflect on. How comfortable is Armenia with the idea of Pax Turkica? I mean, this Turkey being regional rising power and forming kind of a construct wherein other countries feel very happy. It's about sort of a geopolitical influence of Turkey. And quite often what we hear from European analysts and on occasion from our Turkish friends and colleagues that Azerbaijan should not exacerbate Prime Minister Pashinyan's circumstances. We hear this line on a regular basis. I wonder if you could reflect on these two elements.
First of all, I have to say that majority of Armenian society is very in favor of good relations with all neighbors, including Turkey and Azerbaijan, despite all the problems we had in the past. At the same time, using a term like Pax Turkica is hardly attractive for Armenian, again, because of historic memories. And so we should not abuse this term to keep people away of the process. But I think terms like regional cooperation and establishment of better relations in the region, including other countries of the region, that would surely be very attractive for Armenian public. Another issue is that this cooperation within our region should not be alternative for European aspiration of Armenian society, which is quite strong, and we see quite strong support of Armenian public for the process of rapprochement between Armenia and European Union. You know about adoption of a law in the Parliament of Armenia, which is already signed by the President, about start of the process of Armenian membership to EU. Whatever, let's say, a long way it will be, but still for Armenia, engagement of Europe in our region and making our region as a whole closer to Europe is another important issue, another priority for Armenian society and Armenian political elite, or a part of political elite. So we should not create kind of choice between regional cooperation, like formats like 3+3 or 2+3, with, let's say, Westernization or Europeanization of Armenia. So that's probably the main discourse that is happening now, both in Armenia and I think also the same kind of discussions we can see in Turkey and Azerbaijan. But indeed, we need to take into account those standards of international relations that are promoted by Europe for years, despite currently we see certain differences in that kind of political priorities, also in some European countries. But it is so, and I think that building of trust is quite important. And this is one of the fundaments that Europe can offer to the countries of the region. And I don't think that we have to reject any engagement of Europe in the resolution of our regional problems,
Thank you very much.
Which is happening somehow.
Thank you very much. Yeah, Pax Turkica terminologically may not sound very pleasing to one's ears in Armenia, but substance-wise, if we talk about regional cooperation, as I understand, there's no massive problem there. Ahmad.
May I come in now?
By all means, Ambassador.
Yes. I am very sorry. I apologize. I used the wrong term. It not even should be applied to Azerbaijan. There is nothing like Pax Turkica that would be for the region. Nothing like that. I overstretched my intention, I think.
Yeah.
It was an example.
Yes.
That there should be peace in the region, not Pax Turkica. No.
I understand.
Our ideal is Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Turkey. That can't be Pax Turkica where we have Russia and Iran. So they can also join us if possible, of course.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Ahmad, if I may, I would like to put my next question to you. So, Ambassador Aydan Nurhan said that it is impossible to decouple Azerbaijan from Turkey. It's firmly entrenched there. At the same time, he explained the reasons why the peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia should be signed as soon as possible in order for Armenia to join this wider construct. So, what are the fundamental concerns of Azerbaijan when it comes to the reality in which deal is signed and something bad may happen afterwards? Because we will discuss this synchronized nature of these two tracks and the synchronized nature of the interaction between those two. What are the fundamental concerns of Azerbaijan regarding signing a deal with Armenia without those prerequisites being properly fulfilled? And by those prerequisites, we mean those related to Armenian constitution and OSCE Minsk group. How could they translate into the Turkish-Armenian track and could cause problems for Azerbaijan's regional policy?
I believe it's the fundamental problem for Azerbaijan is implementation of the signed agreement. So we discussed this issue last time also, that Azerbaijan is very much concerned that once the deal reached and signed, there will be misreading of the document from sides. That took place so many times in the history of Armenia-Azerbaijan peace process. Since 1990s, even, like they would say. But the latest example is the 9th article of the three-part statement, where like the Prime Minister of Armenia, Prime Minister Pashinyan, he reads in a completely different manner, and Azerbaijan reads in a completely different manner, right? So even once Prime Minister Pashinyan said that where it says that there should be Russian troops placed around this logistical chain. And then I believe that Armenian media even like that they put the exact text and the Armenian Prime Minister's words. So that is the problem that Azerbaijan expects that might arise after signing of the peace deal. So that's one of the fundamental concern of Azerbaijan. So that's why Azerbaijan wants to get rid of all legal and political loopholes that can assist the regional leaders to misread the document. So from Azerbaijan perspective, the political loopholes are generated by the OSCE Minsk group because this is a process allows all OSCE Minsk group member countries, not only co-chairs, but especially co-chair countries, but also the member countries, to come forward and act in a manner that's going to destroy the process. So Azerbaijan in this case is concerned not only like about an exact country, but that generally there might be this kind of approach. And also there are legal loopholes, and the legal loopholes Azerbaijan believes that can be, the cause of for legal loopholes might be Armenian constitution. So because Azerbaijan believes that the previous Armenian leaders, especially Serge Sargsyan, the constitution adopted during Serge Sargsyan times, there are quite many problems quite many points in Armenian constitution that in the future might cause a completely different misreading of the document, and especially Azerbaijan officials several times made it clear that the constitution which prohibits Armenian leaders signing any document recognizing Karabakh as part of Azerbaijan. So these kind of issues are creating, they are the source of the fundamental concerns for Azerbaijan. But also at the same time, I would say that, there are also Azerbaijan worried that any external sponsor, an external power coming in and telling that I can support Armenians or Azerbaijan vision on one of the other issues, and then as a result of that external support, the document might be misread once more. So in this case, Azerbaijan believes that Iran's position on Zengezur corridor significantly affects Armenia's position. So Azerbaijan believes that if not Iran, Armenia's position on Zengezur corridor issue would be completely different. So in this case, how the documents should be designed that in the future, let's say hypothetically, after the war in Ukraine ended or ceasefire deal signed, Russia comes in and supports the, Armenia in a way that Armenia feels empowered and then misreading the document. Of course, it's from Azerbaijan side, Armenian, this is the vision from Azerbaijan side. Armenia might have its own concerns, but this is how Azerbaijan sees the situation. So that's why Azerbaijan wants to make sure that the document has no legal or political loopholes that in the future might lead to the problems in implementation of the agreed text.
So effectively what you're saying, Ahmed, is that if Azerbaijan and Armenia sign that document officially referred to as the Agreement on Peace and Interstate Normalization, and then Turkish-Armenian normalization happens, Armenia will be kind of empowered by virtue of having this normalization underway and could actually take actions militating against the implementation of the agreement as well. I think that's the way I understood what you said.
Exactly.
Boris, if I may...
Just a little addition to that issue. Like, from Azerbaijan perspective, that 10 million euros that the European Union sends to Armenia is not enough even to buy one tank. A modern tank costs much more than 10 million that European Peace Facility sends to Armenia. But that signifies quite a, like it's in Armenia, it's seen as empowerment from European Union, and as a result, we see that Armenia's position on certain issues change from time to time based on that signals that it receives from European Union. For European Union, it's a very symbolic gesture that it's part of the process, but in Armenia it might be read in a bit different manner. So that causes a completely different picture in the region, and as a result, the peace process gets derailed, and then Baku and Yerevan, it creates a lot of problems for Baku.
I see, Ahmed. Thank you. Boris, so we understand. Now let's move into the nitty-gritty practical aspects of the interconnection between these two processes. We understand that normalization could be partial, full, half partial, semi-partial. So what would you anticipate happening on the day after the signing of an Azerbaijani-Armenian peace deal on the Turkish-Armenian front? What will we see actually? Will there be a synchronized process? What is the Turkish-Armenian equivalent of peace deal being signed?
I think that the same agenda that existed during football and diplomacy is still valid for the relations between Yerevan and Ankara. And so upon peace agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan, I guess that opening of the border, and only partial opening, but full opening would be possible. And this was one of the points in the football diplomacy document, I mean the protocols. Then it's, of course, establishment of diplomatic relations. And I think this would be a basis for development of cooperation in all possible fields, especially that we can say that at least with Turkey, certain cultural and civil society relations and dialogue were going on even in the situation when no diplomatic relations existed. So I really don't see any obstacle for that process when we agree with Azerbaijan on normalization of our relations. But still, then the obstacle is in the process between Baku and Yerevan. And again, in the previous program where Ahmad and I myself participated with a Georgian colleague, and in your TV program, I already brought arguments that the Armenian constitution is not legal obstacle. It is psychological, emotional, mental obstacle. Because during the recent 30 plus years, there was no decision enacted that was reflecting the provision of the constitution that raises concerns in Azerbaijan. And this happened with the leadership of 4 different presidents and prime ministers. So why do we think that there will be another one who will behave differently? And if we push forward the, let's say, psychological and emotional perceptions, then of course we will be unhappy about each other for many other reasons as well. But we should not create minefields between us, which are, as I said already in the previous program, symbolic or artificial. We have to follow purely legal approaches. And the legal approaches said that neither constitution of Azerbaijan, despite the fact that some things there are not satisfying Armenians, or in Armenian constitution, although there are some provisions that make Azerbaijan unhappy, they are not obstacle for recognition of territorial integrity of each other. And this is the real ground for normalizations of relations. Yesterday there was an interesting TV program on one of Armenian independent TV companies, which was describing the process of constitutional reforms of Armenia. And it was showing that the process is not consistent at all, and not because the claims from Azerbaijan, but in general. And the Armenian public is very unhappy how this constitutional reform is going on and how the issues that are important for Armenia are reflected in that process. So in such situation, even if there will be, let's say, changes in the preamble of the constitution, and people would be okay with that, but people could be unhappy with many other things in the draft new constitution. And this will become, as I mentioned, a serious spoiler or minefield for Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. We should not go this way, although there are certain agreements informal about this between the leadership of Armenia and Azerbaijan. But again, we should not put the process under risk, prioritizing symbolic issues. That's my message.
Yeah, I remember last time we were conversing with you, you brought forward, I think 15 or 16, I can't remember exactly how many, but arguments in favor of the position that Armenian constitution does not entail any territorial pretensions towards Azerbaijan. And then the counter-argument was that it's not just about the constitution, there are specific pieces of legislation, the letters of the Armenian government addressed to the UN and courts, International Court of Justice. But you said it's a separate issue. I remember that conversation very, very vividly indeed. And then Ambassador, I don't know, I mean, I recently read a very interesting article published by Anna Ohanyan. I think Boris probably knows her in person and very well indeed. It was published on the Foreign Policy magazine, and there was an argument that actually was kind of a pro-Turkish argument that Turkey may be late if this normalization does not happen quickly enough. and this normalization being contingent upon the Azerbaijan-Armenian peace deal, Turkey may lose quite a lot in the South Caucasus. What do you make of that argument?
We are in a worry. We're in a worry. Simple. Turkey is in a worry. We should not miss this chance. Now, for us, there is no big deal. Simple. Pashinyan said, history is not our priority, right? Given fact. That's the only thing about Turkey. Turkey, all the other details can be solved. But if history is not the priority, a very diplomatic way of soothing Turkish patience, let's say, and Armenian people may understand what's going to happen, it's enough for us. For the time being, it's enough. But for us, this is our right arm, but our left arm is Azerbaijan. So the ball is between you two. And we can only say thank you to both of you if you agree. Now, beyond that, Boris, a very important message to you. Look at Ukraine, what happened to them. The Western countries and Russia fiercely attack others when their interests deem so. Don't trust the Europeans. We can work together. We can be together. We are neighbors here. And we were neighbors for 1,000 years. And good days, bad days, but we survived together. And you know, for most of history, we were in peace and brotherhood. So we are sincere. We Turks, the Armenians working in Turkey, I think, send their messages to their families. And they're so welcomed here. They're living with Azerbaijani Turks in Turkey. No problem. So we want it quickly because we are very afraid that if we cannot do it now, within 1 year, France started selling weapons. Others may start doing other kinds of tricks. We may lose this opportunity and they can put the region in fire. Not Russia, not Iran, but the Western NATO powers may do it. We don't trust them. So be quick. Solve your problems among yourselves. Turkey has no problem. Believe me, we don't have problem. The only thing we want is to be quick. Quick. Azerbaijan may go into big trouble. Armenia may go into deep trouble. And believe me, within 3 years, if the borders would open among the three of us, Armenian economy will rocket up.
Terribly sorry for interrupting you, Ambassador. I just want to understand this triangle involving Ankara, Baku, and Yerevan.
Yes.
Incredibly intricate. Of course, Azerbaijan and Turkey are allies, but there are certain elements of nuances which one can easily discern and reflect upon. For Azerbaijan, in the context of opening of communications, Angazur corridor, that unhindered access to Nakhchivan exclave is a matter of absolute criticality. And President Aliyev said that without that happening, there will be. I'll come back to it. Allow me to finish. But your argument, I perfectly understand your argument. Your argument is that this is a time to act. Everything else will be sorted out in the fullness of time. Let us address the most important thing, sign the deal, and Turkish-Armenian normalization, and then, of course, Zangezur corridor and other matters will be resolved naturally. That's what you're saying. Azerbaijani argument is that it's not.
I didn't say later on. I didn't say later on.
Well, in the fullness of time, as soon as possible, but subsequently.
Okay, let me tell you this. Some people think that Zangezur corridor is important for Azerbaijan. Now, we in Turkey have a very strong interest, and we hate Western powers plus Russia plus Iran's position. They block the union of Turkic world by blocking Zangezur corridor. So more than Azerbaijan, Turkey is much more than Azerbaijan in need of the Zangezur corridor. Believe me.
Right.
That is the way we think in Turkey, because it blocks my opening to my Turkic brothers in Central Asia. So don't think that we Turks are, secondary thoughts in about Zangezur, because Azerbaijan needs it, Nakhchivan, etc. So we are neglecting it. Not at all. It is not secondary. We don't say let it to time. But we also say that the day we sign the agreement with Armenia, all Armenia will be in Zangezur anyway, right?
I mean, that's very.
What I'm saying. But it's a different thing.
I mean, all Armenia will be Zangezur. I would have phrased it a bit differently, but I'm sure your intentions were perfectly.
Let's let Boris comment on that.
Yeah. Let's not focus on that.
It's another matter. It's another matter.
Okay, Ahmed. Before turning to Boris, Ahmed, let's talk about the practical aspect of this subject. How synchronized are these two processes? I put this question earlier to Boris as well. So we got peace treaty negotiations, and they should naturally culminate in the signing of a peace deal. This is one thing. We have border delimitation and demarcation, separate track, and we have opening of communications track as well. When you look at these two tracks, Turkish-Armenian normalization and Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process, how do you see the element of synchronization, so to speak? Are they actually synchronized? I remember 2 years ago, I read an article published by Benjamin Pogasyan about the element of synchronization, and he was effectively arguing that there will be progress in Azerbaijan-Armenian peace process, there will be proportionate element of progress in the Turkish-Armenian normalization, and I think that you reflected on the self-same as well. Your thoughts, please, Ahmed.
Yeah, well, certain degree of synchronization is needed, because, well, if you don't know where your borders are crossing, the exact location, you don't know where the Zangezur corridor will start and end, right? So that is why, in order to move on with these kind of issues, you have clear that you have a clearly defined borders. Or I believe that there might be other issues in the future. For example, in expert platforms, we discussed the issue that if something happens to, let's say a car passing through Zangezur corridor, or any emergency happens in a train passing through, what will happen to and then who has to intervene in those cases, right? So certain degree of clarity is needed, certain degree of coordination between different tracks is needed. So without that, we cannot move forward. However, there are also like the elements that I believe that we can move on quite independently. For example, the cooperation on water issues, water management, that can take place without clearly knowing where the certain rivers where they cross to Azerbaijan and back to Armenia and etc. Right? So we can define these issues separately, and we can work on those issues separately. But right now for Azerbaijan, the important issue is to eliminate the loopholes, political and legal loopholes that can bring a problem to the implementation of the document in the future. So that is why the certain technicalities and the certain, let's say, theoretical elements of this peace deal, they can be separated. So in this context, of course, like that, we have to approach each element separately and to see, can we move on separately with this issue, or we have to, or it's a part of the something bigger. So based on that assumptions, based on that evaluation, we can say that these issues need coordination, or other issues they need no coordination, and they could be dealt individually.
Thank you, Ahmed. Boris, your last words, please. You heard quite a lot, both from Ahmed and Ambassador, and please share with us your final reflections.
But first of all, I would like to characterize briefly the current process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Unfortunately, we can say that it is in the mode of standby, if not sleep, because all three tracks are kind of in a deadlock. If we are talking about border delimitation, and then we are reaching the points where enclaves are engaged. And I know that there is a communication between Baku and Yerevan about the approaches towards resolution of the problem of enclaves, but this will be certainly a hard process, and we can have certain, let's say, postponing of the process of delimitation. Another track is this communication issue, and we perfectly understand that restoration of the road in the south of Armenia will take time. So many things depend on the method of using this road, will depend on the process of political normalization between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Ahmad mentioned already casualties that could happen and how we deal with them. Indeed, to exploit the road, we need normal relations between the two countries to react on any and address any possible problems. And the third track is, in fact, this peace agreement, which is completely under the dependence on the process of constitutional reform in Armenia, which I already described being very much complicated, difficult, and controversial. Saying this, I would say that certain progress or breakthrough in Armenian-Turkish relations would, of course, be useful. But at the same time, as I mentioned during the start of our discussion, it hardly will happen if there will be no consensus between Baku and Ankara. So probably now it would be very useful if Ankara and Baku, even without participation of Yerevan or with hidden participation of Yerevan, would calculate all the consequences of the prolongation or postponing the process. So maybe certain progress in Armenian-Turkish relations which will allow to overcome distrust and fears could help also the process of Armenian-Azerbaijani relations. But again, this could be only in the level of confidential diplomatic talks. It cannot be an open process when, let's say, just Turkey goes ahead with Armenia without taking into account the position of Baku. So probably this kind of trilateral talks and conversations could be useful. And that is why even 25 years ago, I myself, with my colleague from Baku, we initiated this trilateral format, which was very interesting then and very useful, I think. We still have some good memories about it. So probably restoration of that format in the level of political analysts and experts could be useful, and maybe in this situation of standby of Armenian-Azerbaijani process, this track to diplomacy could produce certain suggestions, certain ideas that would allow to move the process forward.
Thank you very much indeed. Ambassador Aydin Nurhan, Mr. Boris Navasadian, and
Yes.
Ahmed Alili, Director of the Caucasus Policy Center. Please,
One last thing,
by all means.
very short.
Of course.
Okay. The last thing I would like to say again, hurry up. We don't have much to lose as Turkey. But Europeans will put fire in the Caucasus, perhaps to hurt Russia, perhaps for other reasons. So please make peace among you two, not even involve Turkey, but when you need it, we will be there. No problem, but do it quickly. We are very afraid that you may be put into fire again. Turkey can save itself, no problem. But if you start fighting again as the mercenaries of other powers, that would be a pity to your youth, Azerbaijan youth and Armenian youth. Be wise, try your best. If you need us, we will be there. But don't you ever trust Russians nor NATO countries.
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador. So grateful to you again. Thank you very much indeed. Well, the road to peace in the South Caucasus is not a single track, but a convergence of journeys, each with its own weight of history and burden of expectation. As the region stands on the cusp of what may be a moment of profound transformation, the question remains, can diplomacy untangle the past without unraveling the future? You are watching Caucasus Now, and I see you very soon indeed.